Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats and welcome to the stage Cal City's President and Mayor of El Cerrito, Gabe Quinto.
Good morning. Welcome to this important on-stage and live stream conversation about the future of California and the biggest challenges for cities. As the state prepares for a new governor, city leaders need to hear about the candidates' policy platforms, priorities, and plans for partnerships with cities. We also want the candidates to know that the city priorities and understand from day one of their administration how cities are vital to the state's success. And that's why we're hosting today's forum. It's also why, over the past couple of months, we have held meet and greets with the leading gubernatorial candidates. The Cal City's officers, Carolyn Coleman and I, met with Xavier Becerra, Chad Bianco, Katie Porter, Tom Steyer, Antonio Villaraigosa, and Betty Yee. The top 10 candidates for governor were all invited to meet and be here for our meet and greets, as well as to participate in today's forum. Engaging with the candidates in those meetings and today is central to our mission of expanding and protecting local control for cities through education and advocacy. Our end goal is to enhance the quality of life for all Californians. 80% of Californians live in cities. As city officials, our challenges mirror so many of the most urgent statewide issues: housing, homelessness, and disaster preparedness, affordability, and so much more. And that's why it's important to hear from the candidates on how they will be partnering with cities and to address them. Today's event will touch on some of these issues. We're kicking off today's program with a short conversation with Carolyn Coleman, Cal City's Executive Director and CEO, and Scott Schaefer, Senior Political Correspondent and co-host of KQED's Political Breakdown, the radio show, and podcast. This conversation will be followed by a series of one-on-one conversations with 3 of the gubernatorial candidates with Scott Schaefer. It is my pleasure and honor to welcome, again, Carolyn Coleman and Scott Schaefer to the stage.
Hello.
Good morning, good morning. Oh man, what'd you guys do last night? Good morning, good morning. League of California Cities, terrific to be back with you this morning, and I'm so excited about the panel we have for you. I'm also really excited to be here to engage in a conversation with Scott, because we sort of have turned the tables. I get to interview the journalist. So very exciting for me.
I may ask you some questions, though, and I'm just kidding.
That was not a part of the script. Not a part of the script, Scott. And part of the reason why Scott and I wanted to spend a few minutes of time with you before we bring on some of the candidates is so that we can sort of, set the stage for the conversations that Scott will be having with them. Over the course of a campaign season, he has been engaging with so many of them one-on-one through his amazing, amazing podcast. And what we really want to do is bring the spirit of those conversations to you here this morning. So Scott, let me dive right in. Last night, I understand there was a big debate in San Francisco. You were probably watching. I was with my member, so I didn't get a chance to watch. What were your takeaways from that debate?
Well, this was really the first big debate, since Eric Swalwell's campaign imploded a couple of weeks ago. And, we've seen the polls tighten, and some people who were, sort of left for dead catapult to the front, or at least to the middle of the pack. And So I think a lot of folks were wondering, what's the dynamic going to be among these remaining candidates? Who's going to attack who? Who sees who as a risk? And they were looking for fireworks. I think a lot of people, Tom Steyer, who's been near the top of the polls, took some incoming fire from Katie Porter and others as well. But I don't think there was any, viral moment mistake or some moment that's going to be turned into a real, damaging commercial. I mean, I think there were a couple things that, could certainly be used by political consultants to help or hurt one of the other candidates. But I don't think it changed the fundamental dynamic of the race, which is scrambled eggs. I mean, it's up in the air. It's there's no clear outcome. It's anybody's game right now. It's really up for grabs.
Well, maybe after today.
And I was just say one other thing, if I could. You mentioned KQED has done conversations with all the candidates. We're doing, actually, as we speak, Chad Bianco, I can't be there because I'm here, but those are half-an-hour conversations, one-on-one. And I think that it was, to me as a viewer last night, seeing questions like, what are you going to do about homelessness? You have 60 seconds. I just find that personally frustrating and unsatisfying. I don't know what that is exactly, but it's really time management more than anything. So I think that the voters maybe didn't get as much out of it as they might have.
We'll give you a little bit more time today in asking those questions. There's an old saying in politics that Democrats fall in love and Republicans fall in line. But that doesn't seem to be the case with the gubernatorial race today. Now, you've been a student of politics for a very, very long time. In your view, how is this race alike or different from other gubernatorial races you've observed?
Yeah, well, having just gone through Passover, how is this race different from all others? If you haven't been to a Seder, that's what they ask the three questions. But to your point about falling in love and falling in line, no one's falling in love and no one's falling in line. I mean, you've got two Republicans going at it. You've got a bunch of Democrats who are, really determined to make it into the top two. You've got voters, a quarter still say they're undecided, 2 weeks before the ballots go out. So it's just really, I think there are several factors, several reasons for that. One, people are busy. Two, California's 40 million people. It's very hard to get your message across if you're not Arnold Schwarzenegger or Gavin Newsom or Jerry Brown, because these folks, although they may be known in their communities or their cities, Matt Mahan, mayor of San Jose, very large city in California, is not that well known. And so it takes a lot of money and time and attention from voters in order to become known. Early on, it looked like maybe Kamala Harris would run, maybe Alex Padilla would run, maybe Rob Bonta would run. They all took a pass for different reasons. And I think that especially those first two, had Padilla or Kamala Harris run, you would have seen a very much smaller field. But the ones who are left are not as well known and maybe not quite as exciting as an Arnold Schwarzenegger, of course, who is. But I think that it's that combined with the fact that we have a situation in the world and in Washington that just absorbs so much oxygen, it takes in so much oxygen that people who are paying attention at all don't have a lot of time left to pay attention to the gubernatorial race. I think because of what happened with Swalwell, people are now paying attention, very much so, and there's plenty of time to make up your mind or change your mind 6 weeks or so before the election.
Speaking of national politics, what impact do you think they are having on our governor's race?
Well, among the Democrats, I think, voters, California is, it's a blue state, and it's not a majority Democrat, but it certainly leans Democrat. A lot of the independent voters or no party preference voters lean Democrat. So, and Donald Trump's popularity, if you want to call it that, is between 25 and 30%. So you've got, at least among the Democrats, you've got sort of a struggle to see who's going to be the toughest against Donald Trump, who's going to stand up to him on ice, who's going to sue him the most, who is going to take him on this, that, or the other thing. And then on the Republican side, you have Donald Trump supporting Steve Hilton. Last night said he was proud of that. I think a lot of us expected that he would get a bigger bump from that Trump endorsement than he did. It doesn't seem like he's really gotten much of a bump at all, if the polls are accurate. So I think that it's, the whole political climate is very much affected by what's happening. Gas prices, obviously, just international tensions, the economy, tariffs. I mean, if you're a farmer or in a rural community, tariffs are really hurting you, or a small business that imports things. So I think that, the economy, affordability, the situation in the Middle East, Gaza, Israel. I mean, there's just many, many things outside of California that are affecting California. And, we have the 4th largest economy in the world. So, anything that happens that affects the world economy affects us probably disproportionately.
So in the last 2 weeks, it seems like every day things are changing in this race. And we certainly watched Swalwell drop out. Yee suspended her campaign. What do you think those changes, what impact have they had on the race? What's different today since those two are out?
Yeah, well, I mean, the big, huge change was Eric Swalwell. He was gaining momentum. He was getting endorsements. Adam Schiff endorsed him. He got the SEIU endorsement, big union. He was getting money. He was near the top or at the top of the polls among Democrats. If you look at prediction markets, which are basically, I don't know, conventional wisdom, I guess, he had skyrocketed, he was the favorite to win. And then literally on Friday, when the Chronicle and the CNN broke their stories, you could see the numbers going down for him. And he's now at 1% chance of winning or something. So it had a huge impact. And I think it also drew attention to the race generally. I mean, unfortunately, it takes something so tragic as what these women went through to get people to pay attention. But as I said, people are busy. Now they are paying attention. And, he had about, between 15 and 23 or so % of the vote. Now those voters are sort of up for grabs. They seem to have at least initially gravitated in one way or another. So that, his getting out really, suddenly all those endorsements, all those voters, all those donors were available to the other candidates. Betty Yee, I think less so. Obviously, she was, never got really above 1 or 2 or 3% in the polls. But I think she gained a lot of respect. I mean, a lot of people, it was interesting at the California State Party Convention, you need 60% to get an endorsement. Nobody got that much. Swalwell, I think, was number 1 with 24%, but Betty Yee was second with 17%. She's very well liked and respected within the party. So I think a lot of people were disappointed that her campaign or candidacy didn't do better. We've never had a woman governor, and she's not going to be the first, at least not this year. So, I think people were disappointed. She rather quickly endorsed Tom Steyer, which I was a little surprised by. But I don't think...
Why did that surprise you?
Well, I watched her press conference the day that she dropped out, and it was very interesting. I asked her a couple questions, including what is she looking... I didn't expect she would say who she was going to endorse, because she said she wasn't going to say, but I asked her what she was looking for in somebody. And to me, it didn't... I knew from what she said she wasn't going to endorse Katie Porter, and I didn't think she would endorse Tom Steyer, but she did. So, she had perfectly valid reasons, but it was a little bit of a surprise. But because she didn't have a lot of support to begin with, I'm not sure how much of a big signal that's going to be. It's not like she had major endorsements that are now up for grabs or that kind of thing. But I think her stature as a person and as an elected official really went up among those who were paying attention.
Now, I know in just a few minutes we're going to be hearing from Villaraigosa, from Thurmond and Becerra. But there are some candidates still in the race who are not with us today, and I know that you've been having conversations with them over the year. Tell us what we maybe would have heard from them if they were here.
Well, our program, Political Breakdown, we have always from the very beginning taken the approach that it's important for voters, just people, to understand who are these folks, not what's their 5-point plan on housing or the economy, or how they're going to get gas prices down, or how they're going to get housing built. I mean, that's important, but they have those talking points and they use them quite regularly, and it's not that enlightening. And so what we try to do with almost everybody we interview, especially if we haven't interviewed them before, is to find out who they are as people. What are their values? What kind of family did they grow up in? What did they overcome as children, as students, early in their careers? And so with each of the candidates, we did that. He's out of the race, but I was surprised to hear that Eric Swalwell had moved after they moved from Iowa, where his father was a police chief. They moved 13 times in the Bay Area, which is, that's got to have an impact on somebody. We talked with Antonio Villaraigosa, who is here, of course, but stories of his growing up in LA and getting in fights and being stabbed with a screwdriver. I mean, just like all kinds of personal things that people overcome. I mean, everyone has a personal story to their lives. We all do. We all have that. And to me, that is the most sort of enlightening thing, because you get a sense of where they're coming from. Like, what are their values? What do they care about? What are they passionate about? Who do they care about? Who are they going to listen to if they get elected? And I think if you listen to the podcasts, to the interviews that we did, we're doing Chad Bianco today, I think I mentioned, I think you get that. And so for all these folks, it's, I have to say, there isn't one who we talked to who, when they walked out, I thought less of them than when they walked in. They all have something to offer. Whether you agree with them politically or not, they have a story to tell, they have a point of view, and I think it's worth listening to.
My final question for you, Scott, and I know it's one that many in the audience have. With the jungle primary system that we have in California, where the top two advance, do you think the Democrats will get locked out of the June primary?
No. There's a chance. It's plausible. I think, obviously, the party is freaked out about that possibility. I think it was greater before Swalwell dropped out. Basically, you've got a pie, and you've got however many are left now, 8 Democrats, like slicing up the pie, and you got 2 Republicans. And so if the Republicans split their share of the electorate roughly in half, and both end up with, 18, 20%, then there's a chance that could happen. That's not likely to happen, nor is it likely that none of the other Democrats are going to begin to, break away from the pack. So I think it's pretty unlikely. I think it's also not that likely there'll be 2 Democrats. So I think, we're going to have a more traditional kind of a runoff. I think some people the party I know is very, like I said, freaked out about all the uncertainty. But, for voters, in some ways it's better to have a real race than to have a coronation, to have Kamala Harris gets in, everybody else drops out, boom, she's the governor. The party might have liked that, but in terms of the voters and what's best for the state of California, I think it's not so bad to have a competitive race for governor.
Scott, thank you for answering my questions today.
Yeah.
We are so excited to have you here to speak to the candidates. We knew that Scott would be the right moderator for this session. What we also learned today is that he has, I'll just say, if I get to characterize this, a fondness for cities, having spent some time serving in San Francisco City Hall. So thank you for being here, and let's all enjoy the conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. All right. So as you heard, next we're going to hear a series of one-on-one conversations. And just to repeat again, Cal Cities did invite 10 candidates. The ones we'll be hearing from today are the ones who said yes. And I should say that I alone developed the questions. Nobody from Cal Cities has seen the questions, nor have the candidates or their campaigns. So today we're going to hear from Xavier Becerra, Antonio Villaraigosa, and our next guest, Tony Thurmond. He, for the past 8 years, has been the state superintendent of public instruction, the school's chief. Before that, he represented parts of the East Bay in the state assembly, and he served a few years on the Richmond City Council as well. Please welcome Tony Thurmond. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Have a seat.
Good morning. Buenos dias. All right, just making sure I'm with my people, right? Can I give a shout out to my mayor? Where's my mayor? Gabe Quinto, City of El Cerrito. And my Richmond people, City of Richmond. Richmond all the way in the back of the house. How about I also have a residence in the Inland Empire. Any Inland Empire people in the house? Awesome, awesome. Great to see you all. All right, that's it. I'm done. Bye. See ya.
You should run for office. So, California is a state of 40 million people, very
Yes.
diverse,
Yes.
4th biggest economy in the world. Why are you the guy to follow Gavin Newsom in the governor's office?
Well, look, at the end of the day, I think it comes down to experience. And, I, as a city council member, like many of you, we built thousands of housing units. Now, we had redevelopment back then, and as governor, I will bring redevelopment back to provide resources to our cities and counties to have resources, not just mandates for building housing, but I've been given the opportunity to build housing, to work with the homeless, to address crime and safety. I have a plan for this state, a vision. We're going to build 2 million housing units. We're going to provide a tax credit to working people in our state and create good paying jobs. And I have the lived experience of many of the people who are depending on us to deliver for them. Californians are having a hard time, and I understand that. I lost both my parents by the time I was 6 years old. I'm the son of immigrants who came here and cleaned bathrooms for a living to create a better life. I grew up in a household where we didn't have food most of the time. I was raised on the free lunch program, on food stamp coupons, and a whole lot of government cheese. Any of y'all ever had that government cheese? They're laughing up in the front. That big old box of cheese with that super thick plastic is wrapped. You have to fight to get into it. Best quesadilla or grilled cheese sandwich you ever had.
My first job in California, I was working for a food bank, and it was 1982, and that cheese was coming off the trucks.
Did you know there's still 1 billion pounds of that cheese holed up in a cave somewhere? They're waiting for Armageddon.
I'm sure it'll never spoil.
My point is somebody who's had the struggle will fight for the working people. Yeah. And that's why I believe experience, lived experience, and vision is important for this state.
So as I said at the beginning, part of your experience is you served on the Richmond City Council. So
yes.
What did you see as a local official about Sacramento that you would bring with you in terms of what maybe Sacramento does to make life easier or harder for local governments?
I'll be honest, most of what I saw is how Sacramento makes life harder for those who serve in local government, passing down mandates without funding. And going from the city council to then the school board and seeing it even worse. And I thought, if this is the way it's going to work, I'm going to go to Sacramento and get some resources for the people who are doing the hardest work in our local government. And I think it's important that a governor partners with our communities, listens to our leaders, and builds policies that actually work for the things that you need to take care of your constituents. That's what I plan to do as governor. It's not about being in Sacramento. And if you notice, when I shouted out all the places where I live, I never lived in the Capitol. That was a place for me to come to work. I took that train to the Capitol every single day, came home, took my kids to school, and made sure that I was bringing home resources, and that's what I would do as governor.
You said you want to build 2 million homes. Gavin Newsom, when he ran for governor 8 years ago, said he was going to build 3.5 million homes. Not even close.
Sure.
Okay. And yet, he signed over 100 bills.
Yeah.
Jerry Brown signed a bunch of bills to make it easier to build housing.
That's right.
So what do you know that they don't know that's going to let you build 2 million homes?
Well, here's the reality. The tools that we need to do that, we already have available at our disposal right now. In every county in the state, there's surplus property. There's 75,000 acres of land that's ready for development. If we just built 12 units on each of those parcels, we get to 2.3 million units. This plan has been studied and tested, but never implemented. And I'm saying that we do it because each of the school districts in our state, in every county, have surplus property that is ready to build. And that's how we get to 2.3 million units. What I'll do differently is make sure that our school districts have some startup development money, that they have technical assistance so they can partner with developers to build that housing. And then we can build housing for teachers, classified staff, nurses, police officers, firefighters, and others, city and county workers, others who are struggling to be able to have a home in our state.
This governor, with some of the bills he signed, especially SB 79, gives the state the power to basically force local governments to build more housing. Yeah. The Attorney General has sued Huntington Beach, for example, for not building enough housing. As governor, you said you want to help local governments, right. But for those who don't want to build more housing for one reason or another, what would you do?
Look, to me, there's a difference between a jurisdiction that says we can't build because we don't have the resources, and a jurisdiction that just says we got ours, we don't want anybody else in this community. And I think if it's the latter, there have to be some tools of enforcement to carry out the law. But aren't you all tired of getting mandates passed down to you from the state with no resources to get anything done? Are you ready to have some resources that come your way to make? Our state should be, even with our budget woes, we can afford to provide $1 billion every single year for affordable housing to support our communities. How's that sound to you? as governor, that's what we will do. We will get that money to you to build. As a council member, we built thousands of units of housing in my time. We could not have done that without redevelopment. It's time that we get some resources and not just tough talk and not just headlines. If you want a governor who's not just about a headline, but somebody who's about the details and getting you some resources, I invite you to join our journey. Come to TonyThurmond.com and let's work together to get this done. A better California is possible. Let's do it together.
You, of course, schools are important to every community. You've been school superintendent for 8 years, and I know that there are school districts, there's the Department of Education. You don't control everything, but
honestly, we don't control anything, but that's okay. That's okay.
What have you learned? I mean, you must have, even if you don't control it. I mean, you look at states like New Jersey that are doing much better than California. I mean, our graduation rates are high, but our performance rates are not so high. So what have you learned that you would take with you to the governor's office?
Scott, I walked into this job eyes wide open. I enjoyed serving the legislature, representing Berkeley, Richmond, and Oakland. Everyone told me, don't run for the state superintendent job. They said it will kill your political career. And then they said this thing, they said you're gonna make everybody angry. They were right about the angry part. I can't go through a grocery store without somebody stopping me to talk to me about any issue. We have 1,000 districts in the state, and they're all struggling with declining enrollment and the lack of funding. And so in the 4th largest economy in the world, we cry poor when it comes to how we fund our kids. California used to be #1 in per pupil spending, and that was before Prop 13 passed. There's a direct correlation in the impact of our funding in our schools and the funding that cities and counties have to deliver essential services. And as governor, I will close the loopholes in Prop 13 and do it in a way that protects homeowners and seniors and small businesses and farmers and get you your money so that you have resources and to get our schools the resources that they need.
So when you say close loopholes in Prop 13, you mean what? Remove
split roll tax?
Split roll, like
Absolutely.
So require the commercial property be removed from that protection of the...
Absolutely. But please make
has to go to the ballot.
But please make sure everybody in this room understands I'm not planning to tax any of you. But yes, I am planning to tax billionaires. They have to pay their fair share. Californians have been paying more than their fair. Only one non-billionaire in the room. Okay, I get it. Listen, Californians are taxed to the hilt, and you all have had to take the burden on of trying to balance the lack of revenue with more sales taxes and more parcel taxes and bond measures, and you deserve more. And so, yeah, I think that we have to close those loopholes in Proposition 13. It'll get revenue for our schools, for our cities, our counties, for police and fire services, right? If that's 90% of your budget, you ought to have resources to help you pay it and not have to always go out for a parcel tax or a measure or a sales tax measure. I vote for your sales tax measures because I understand you need the revenue, but the state has a responsibility to deliver revenue for our cities.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, that split roll idea was on the ballot and lost a few years ago, right? Prop 5?
It lost during the pandemic. I think people were confused. I think people, the opposition to closing the split roll ran a wonderful campaign that said everyone in here was going to pay, more in taxes. And the reality is that it would have corrected a situation where big corporations that own property pay the same way that any homeowner in this room pays based on the current day value of your property. That seems fair to me.
Okay. Before I let you go.
We done already?
Yeah. It's speed dating.
Speed dating.
So the Cal Cities wanted me to ask folks, cities have found the Homeless Housing Assistance Prevention Grant Program, HAP, to be the best way to address homelessness.
Yes.
Historically, the program was funded at $1 billion. You may have
Yes.
already alluded to this, but this year, the state eliminated the funding, and in
Yes.
the current next year's budget, the governor is proposing just $500
That's right.
million. What is your impression of that program, and will you commit to fully funding it?
I do commit to fully funding it. I've already reached out to the chairs of the legislative committees that control the budget for HAP funding, and I've said our cities and counties need more, not less, and that they should increase the allocation. This is budget season. I know you all are doing your lobby days, and you have the ability to lobby legislators to say that we need more. We have 10,000 homeless teenagers who are sleeping on our streets, 15 and 16 years old. My bill, AB 673, would provide subsidized housing for them, and there are two measures that would provide affordable housing for a $10 billion affordable housing bond, and I support that, and I hope you will too, because 40% of those who are homeless in our state are older Californians who are struggling between making the decision between rent and food or rent and medication. Yeah. We've got to provide housing. We can close homelessness gaps in this state. But we have to make sure that our programs around homelessness have three things. One, they have to have accountability in the funds that go out. There have to be audits from every state department that give these dollars out. But we have to make sure that our homeless programs have built-in substance abuse treatment programs and mental health programs to help those who are struggling. Otherwise, we're just giving away the tiny homes. And I believe that we can do better. No person should sleep on the street or be arrested for being homeless, but we have to do better. Shame on us if we don't. And as your governor, I want to get you the resources to provide real homelessness programs in your cities and counties.
All right, Superintendent, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.
It's a pleasure.
Stay well. All right. Well, our next candidate is a familiar name in Sacramento. No stranger to local or state government. He represented Los Angeles in the State Assembly for 6 years, 2 of them as Speaker from 1998 to 2000, and then, he was Speaker from 1998 to 2000. Then he served on the LA City Council. Then he was elected Mayor of LA in 2005, where he spent 8 years. Please welcome Antonio Villaraigosa. Hello, sir. How are you, Mr. Mayor? Looking very good to see you.
Good to see you.
All right, you got the mic.
Good afternoon, everybody.
They gave you the mic. That's dangerous. No, I'm just kidding. So, you have said that California, that our future demands transformational leadership. What does that mean?
You know, well, first of all, it's great to be here with all of you, but I think we're tired of promises, politicians who say they're going to do X or Y and have never done anything closely approximating what they're saying they're going to do. Let me remind you, everybody, when I became mayor, well, first of all, let's speak about Speaker. We were a red state turning purple. I balanced 2 budgets with a surplus when we had 42 and 48 votes. I'm the author of Healthy Families, the largest expansion of healthcare. The biggest effort to clean up the air, Carl Moyer Act, until AB 32 and SB 32. Since the Clean Air Act, that's how big it was. When I was mayor, 1 out of 3 schools were failing. By the time I left, it was a 60% increase in the graduation rate. I transformed the schools of LA from where they were. LA was the most violent big city in the United States of America, and let me remind you, everybody, it's bigger than San Jose, San Francisco, Oakland, and San Diego combined. It was the most violent big city in America. By the time I left, a 48% drop in violent crime with constitutional community policing. #1 American city in reducing greenhouse gases, #5 in the world. Built more infrastructure than anybody in the United States. We need a course correction in this state. Folks, I was a speaker before I was mayor. And guess what I learned? Sometimes I'd add, and Jerry Brown learned the same thing, I'd ask my staff from time to time, who voted for this? They said, you did, sir. And you know what I realized? There's too much, obviously, unfunded mandates. But what I mean, and I'll get into all that, but to finish the answer, I think we need a transformation.
To what? Transformation how? Like to what? What does it look like?
To what? To a state that's safer? To a state where our schools work? We're #1 in teacher pay, 21st in pupil spending, mid-30s in reading and math, and dead last in graduation. I'm the only candidate that supported Prop 36, by the way. I did commercials on it. I didn't just hide and say I supported it afterwards. I actually supported it. Why? Because I saw what was happening on the streets. And the reason why I'm coming back is because I think we need a proven problem solver. I've made a commitment. The problems we face are too big. We can't wait for 8 years. And so what I've said, the pledge I've made is I'm going to commit to 4 years, because every decision I make, every day I serve, will be about fixing the problem, not keeping the job or looking for the next one.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by transformative. In every job I've had, I did my job. I left the state better than I found it when I was speaker, and I left the city better than when I found it.
On housing, as I mentioned earlier, Governor Newsom has signed, I think, over 100 bills to make it easier to build housing, increase density, mandates, and so on, clearing away CEQA that was abused in some ways by people who didn't want housing, NIMBYs, and yet we're not really building any more housing than we did 8 years ago. There are 40,000 units of housing in the state of California that have been approved, but no shovels in the ground. Why?
How many mayors in the room? Mayor? I see one. Supporter and a friend. Mayors get things done. The legislature sets goals. Let's talk about some of those goals. One of them on housing. They love to set goals and then aren't accountable for not meeting those goals. I'm going to put on dashboards every goal that I set. I did that as mayor. That's how I hit those strides that I just mentioned a few minutes ago.
But a lot of these are local decisions, you know?
Right. And that's the other thing. Because I've been a mayor and the only one in this race that has, and didn't just, worked in local government as a council member and a mayor for 10 years, I learned a lot. Too much overregulation coming from Sacramento, too many unfunded mandates. Don't tell you have to do X number of affordable housing, workforce housing, market rate housing, and homeless housing. Don't give you a quarter for it, or when they do, put so many requirements on you that it makes you impossible. Don't free up on CEQA. I'm going to go farther than you. CEQA's absolutely broken. It's absolutely broken, and we all know it. That's why we can't build anything. That's why the high-speed rail is where it is today, because CEQA has just made it impossible to build in the state.
That's been addressed in legislation, and as I said, there are 40,000 units that have already been approved, and they're not being built.
You just said it. The governor's responsibility isn't just to pass the laws, it's to implement them, just like a mayor, everybody. Some of you are city council members, but when you become mayor, you're going to see. Your job isn't just to set a goal, your job is to actually do it. And I got a record doing that.
Part of the issue is cost. It can, in many places like LA, San Francisco, it can cost $1 million for a unit of affordable housing. How is that sustainable? Why is it so expensive? And what would you do? What alternatives, what innovations, what transformation would you have in mind to change that?
Well, let's say the cost of land. With all the city, county, school district, and state lands that are currently idle, why aren't we using them to build affordable housing? To cut down the cost, because now you're paying for the land, okay? CEQA, you're right, they passed a lot of laws, but they're not pushing the implementation of those laws. When I was mayor, it used to take 2.5 years to open up a restaurant. And so all the cities around me, Culver City and Pasadena and all the cities around me were opening up restaurants when we weren't. I did one-stop shopping. I put 12 agencies in one department, and I said, who do you work for? I work for housing. Who do you work for? I work for DWP. Who do you work for? I work for fire safety. No, you don't. You work for me, and we're going to get this done in 6 months. And we did. And that's what we need to do for housing, and not just affordable and homeless housing, but workforce and market rate. Part of why it costs so much to buy a house is because we don't have enough. And if you read Abundance, the Democrats overall, but this state, worse than any state, makes it impossible to build.
Well, you mentioned abundance. One of the things that Ezra Klein likes to talk about is the so-called everything bagel liberalism, which it means like all these things that get added on with the best of intentions, environmental rules, prevailing wage, other things that add to the cost of housing, and the end result is housing doesn't get built. So which of those things on the bagel are you willing to do without? You could have a plain bagel, poppy seed bagel, what?
I think it's time for us to say plain bagels are fine. Let me give you an example. The average homeless unit costs $850,000 a unit, everybody. That is not sustainable. You're building tiny homes for $100 grand in LA. Hope of the Mission. I was just there the other day. They have, by the way, building more permanent supportive housing than anyone in this state. And they have roadblock after CEQA, red tape, zoning laws. I mean, the list goes on. And so I've said, when you've been a mayor, you understand, don't let the perfect get in the way of the good.
But that means changing laws and policies.
It means changing laws, and it means driving that change. And that's what I mean about being transformational. Almost nobody, if you read the papers about all the candidates, almost nobody says that I didn't do what I just said. In fact, nobody has said it up to now. Political Fact checked it out in the last race. The LA Times, which, was my newspaper of record and, certainly was on top of everything I did. They agreed I did all that stuff. You do it if you're focused on getting things done. I'm the only one that's been a CEO of a governmental entity that's most like the state. 50,000 employees. Other folks may have been agency heads, but at the end of the day, there's nothing. LA has more, the kind of poverty. Anybody from Fresno? Okay, it has the kind of poverty of the Central Valley. I hope you know that. And it also has more wealth. We have a lot of undocumented, a lot of poor people. So it's a complicated city, and the city council is very powerful in my town. And yet we got this done because the job of a governor, the job of a president, and a job of a mayor is to drive, not just to pass laws and set goals, but to get it done. And cities are trying to do that, but we try to dictate everything from Sacramento. And I'll tell you something. I get back here, we're going to change that because I've been a mayor. And I saw that, I did some of it. Jerry Brown admitted, you remember when he said that. He did, you vote for things that sound good and it's pie in the sky and you think it, and then it doesn't work quite like that on the ground.
Well, redevelopment agencies.
Well, and then what we do is we get married to our ideas and we don't want to change them. When 2/3 of you come up and say it's not working, we say, well, yes, it is. It's a great law. It's the best law in the state, in the country. Well, guess what? I believe in local control. That doesn't mean on housing that we're not going to push. We will. But we're not going to dictate every little detail the way we do, because that's not the way you build.
But numbers, you would.
Yeah,
push.
Numbers at the end of the day. We're all accountable for numbers. I believe in dashboards, everybody. Big joke, real quick. I get elected. What were there, 10,000 people at my inauguration. I go upstairs. We're having a big, reception. They bring me after 15 minutes. They say, you got a meeting. I said, with who? They said, with McKinsey. I said, what's his first name? I didn't know what a management consulting group was, but you know what we did? We put every campaign promise with metrics and people, and that's how we drove the change that we were able to get.
You mentioned a moment ago that you were in support of Prop 36, which, for those who don't know, gave prosecutors the ability to charge some drug-related felonies with an option to seek treatment. That ballot measure was not funded, and so there's a little bit of funding in the budget. What would you do as governor?
Fund it. I did a commercial. I don't know if you saw, not a commercial, a social,
Media
thing. I go to Target, and I said, I'm here at Target looking for deodorant, and it's behind locked windows. And I'm here looking for deodorant because Sacramento stinks. I said, the people voted for Prop 36, more than 70% voted for Prop 36, and they don't want to fund it. So I will fund it on day one. Look.
So what would you fund? The drug treatment
slots? The drug treatment, of course, because the rap in the opposition was there's not enough drug treatment. Actually, that's true, but there also were hundreds and even thousands of people refusing drug treatment multiple times. So that wasn't, that's a legitimate thing. We should have enough of it.
Yeah.
I'm not for putting people, I took on 3 strikes, you're out. I was president of the ACLU. I'm not for putting everybody in prison. But I'll tell you what, you can't keep on stealing in our cities, and it's okay. No, it's not okay. And I was the only Democrat that took that position publicly, did commercials in English and Spanish.
A lot of cities are having a hard time hiring enough police officers. It's a little better than it was right after George Floyd was killed. But what ideas do you have that could come from Sacramento to make it easier or quicker or whatever to hire more police, more law enforcement?
I have a lot of ideas about it. Remember, everybody, I said crime went down 48%. I took us from 9,000 police officers to 10,000. Chicago has 12,500, and they have 1 million less people, and they're not as big a city. I believe we need law enforcement. What do we need to do? We need to aggressively recruit. We went into churches. We went everywhere we could find people. We need to accelerate the hiring of these people because.
But how?
Well, here's an example. I threatened to fire the personnel manager. I told the chief, if I met with him every single week on police hiring, every single week. That's how, in the middle of a recession, we went from 9,000 to 10,000 cops. This state doesn't have enough law enforcement. Everybody.
But what is Sacramento going to do to make that better, other than firing personnel directors?
Well, not firing, holding them accountable and pressuring them.
But are there incentives? Are there things?
Yeah, there are incentives. Bill Clinton did the 100,000 police officers. I believe that the state needs to focus on supporting our cities who are struggling right now. I know that, with the kind of incentives to hire police officers. But remember, the best way to say what you're going to do, your mother told you that. The best way to say what you do is to demonstrate what you've done. I'm the only person in the country that added 1,000 officers to their city municipal police force in those 8 years, because those were the worst years. There were 4 of them were recession. I was cutting everything, and I wouldn't cut the police force. Yeah. And I got a lot of pushback from the unions because I wouldn't cut back the police force. But guess what? LA was safer since any time since I was born in the 1950s.
All right, Mayor Villaraigosa, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Scott.
Take
good
care.
To see you all.
Yeah, good to see you. Stay well. All right.
Good to see you.
All right. Well, we have one more candidate and a new glass of water as well. Xavier Becerra represented Los Angeles in Congress for 24 years. In 2017, Governor Jerry Brown made him Attorney General when the Attorney General, Kamala Harris, got elected to the U.S. Senate. He then joined the Biden administration to become the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Please welcome Xavier Becerra. Looks like you got a little spring in your step there.
I actually do.
All right. Well, thanks for being here. I know you had a big night last night on the debate stage. I want to ask you about something, actually, that came up last night, because this is on the mind of a lot of people in the audience, and that is homelessness. All the candidates were asked to grade the governor on homelessness. You gave him the highest grade. You gave him an A. Now, when I was a kid, you bragged about an A to your parents. Should we be bragging about homelessness right now in California?
I said A for effort.
Yes, you did.
You did. Say that was his grade. I said A
fair.
for effort. And let me ask you, those of you who are elected, do you try to do the best job you can for your locality? I suspect all of you say yes. Do you think everyone would give you an A? No. I'm not going to condemn someone for trying. Results matter, and that's why I follow that up by saying it's all about accountability. And so at the end of the day, the most important A is the A in accountability. But I'm not going to condemn someone who makes the effort. At the end of the day, if you make an effort and you get an A in effort and you didn't do your job, when it comes time for election, you'll find out that that A for effort counts for nothing. And when you have to get reelected.
Yeah.
And so let's not and I say this to a crowd that probably understands this, let's not just load up on people who are in elected office simply because the world is not totally rosy. If you try hard, then I want to give you a chance. But if you don't at the end produce, that's where it counts. And that's why I said, before I give you money, my money, your money, taxpayer money, I want to see accountability.
So you're giving him high marks for trying. You said everyone here and local officials try the best they can, but the results, the accountability is not there. So where is it failing? What's going wrong? Why aren't we seeing more for our money, so to speak?
Well, and I suspect there are many answers because I suspect many of you have gotten some of those homeless funds and either you have or have not produced enough results. Here's what I will tell you, I believe has been one of the gaps in the process. We haven't moved people off the streets quickly enough and kept them off before they show up again. And for most taxpayers, most families, they don't know the work you've done. They look only at the street. It's the result. And you know what? That's fair because they don't do your work. They paid you, they voted for you, so you would do it. They just want to see the result. We owe them results. Though, if you'll notice, Scott, one of the things that I said in my answer is, I'm not a city mayor or council person. I'm not a county supervisor. I would be the governor of the state of California. You all get to determine how to use those resources and in which programs to try to deal with homelessness. I just have to expect accountability from you. I need to get the results. But here's what I will tell you I will do as governor. And I say it to each and every one of you because I suspect you'll come knock at my door once I'm there if I don't deliver the results. My job is to keep another Californian from joining the ranks of homeless in your city or your county. And I can do that far cheaper than trying to help you pull them off the streets and get them stood up, cleaned up, ready to work again. And so I would rather make a further investment in keeping people in their home. You lost your job. You're in the process of trying to secure another job. But for the last few months, you haven't had income. Now you're starting to fall behind on your rent. Before you know it, you may have to leave your premises.
How do you prevent fraud in a program like that, where people say, I can't afford to pay the rent, I need help?
Well, yeah, you have to document it. But then again, if you're going to have anyone try to administer that program, it doesn't hurt to have someone who was the chief law enforcement officer of the state, who served as the attorney general for 4 years, and made sure that we did a lot of oversight and enforcement. So you're right. There's always going to be the chance that someone's going to try to commit fraud. But it sure helps to have someone who knows how to go after that fraud if it does occur.
Everyone agrees that we need to build more housing in California. There have been many ideas floated. There have been dozens and dozens, more than 100 bills signed into law, making it easier to get around, not to get around CEQA, but to get through CEQA, higher density, state mandates and so on. And yet, for all the state has done, and the state has done quite a bit, we're not seeing an uptick in housing construction. Why do you think that is?
We'll give the new legislation a chance to work. Many of you will probably want to make sure you express yourselves on how the implementation might be going with these new laws. Some of these new laws curtail the jurisdiction and authority of local governments, and you may want to step in and voice your interests and concerns. But what I will tell you is this. I have seen reports that there are some total of about 40,000 housing units, mostly affordable, but some market rate, I believe, that are actually ready to go, shovel ready, that are just waiting. Typically, what's going to be the thing that is keeping them from tipping over is last tranche of funding, or maybe it's a particular licensing or permit requirement. But in my first 100 days, those 40,000 units are going to go. If they are in your jurisdiction, I'm talking to you, because I want to find out what's going on. If it's the developer needs that last tranche of funding, I'm talking to the legislature if I can't find the money in my current pots. And I'm going to say, if these have checked every single box but one, they are essentially shovel ready, I'm putting shovel in ground before my first 100 days are done. Because I believe, and I think you'll understand this, we owe the voters, the public, action, results. I can't build fast enough to get 2 million units 3 million units up. But if I know there are 40,000 housing units that are shovel-ready, I'm getting shovel in ground.
It costs roughly $1 million to build a unit of affordable housing, and I asked the last candidate, why do you think that is, and what would you do, what creative ideas do you have to bring that cost down? Because there are some options, but they kind of tend to poke some bears.
Yeah, on the supply side, on the development construction side, yeah, we have to try to reduce the cost of construction. Modular construction is coming. If we work closely with the unions on making sure the labor that's used to build these modular housing units, which, by the way, you can make high quality housing units that are essentially built at a factory, most of them, they're shipped over and assembled on site. You reduce the cost of trying to actually erect a home by doing that. I think for me the concern is, are we making sure that we pay a decent wage to the people who are doing that industrial construction, not on-site construction? And if you do that, you reduce some of the cost. The more we have homes coming up, the less the pressure is on the demand side for the housing that exists. And it's basic economics. If you reduce the extent of the demand, the pressure on price on the supply side goes down. And so we just got to build. And that's why you can understand why the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get those 40,000 units that are shovel-ready going, because I can't get 3 million units going in my first 100 days. But if I'm being told that there are 40,000 units out there, we're flying.
In 2012, the state, at the urging of Governor Brown, eliminated redevelopment agencies after he benefited from them when he was mayor of Oakland. Was that a mistake? Was it necessary? Would you bring them back, and if so, how would they be different?
Someone tell me if I'm wrong, but that was just a money game, a budget game. It's always a budget game, right? And you look for money wherever you can. And you, unfortunately, were on the side that didn't have the biggest lever. The state had the biggest lever. And then they were picking up money wherever they could because the deficits were pretty big. I think it's unfortunate. I did a lot of work when I was on the Ways and Means Committee in Congress in the House, trying to help with build more units through the low-income housing tax credit. We were constantly trying to advance ways that we could incentivize developers to build affordable housing, and the low-income housing tax credit at the federal level was perhaps the best way. Outside of HUD, which would essentially do subsidized housing altogether, we were doing private development housing, and we were using the tax code to try to give incentives so the developers could go in there and make it affordable through use of the low-income housing tax credit. And so I would do something very similar. Should we return to the redevelopment agency days? We could. I know that there were some real problems with accounting with those funds. And again, it's accountability, that the funds are being used the right way. Because at the end of the day, the taxpayers don't care what the mechanism is. They don't care about the means. They want to see the end.
You have made your time as Attorney General a big part of your campaign. You sued the Trump administration over 100 times. I know you won many of those.
By the way, I didn't sue him because I was going to run for governor 8 years later. I sued him because he was violating the law.
Fair. And I think it's fair to say that suing Donald Trump when you're in California is kind of low-hanging fruit, in the sense that it's popular. I don't mean it wasn't important.
I've never gotten standing ovations for being so litigious, but that's what happens periodically.
But what about last night in the debate? Katie Porter made the point of saying something like, you've taken corporate checks, but you're not holding them accountable. You've taken money from, I think, Chevron, Southern California Edison. So where's the evidence that as governor, you will hold them accountable? I mean, look at utility rates are going through the roof.
I love that question. Where's the evidence? Google AG Becerra lawsuits against fossil fuel industry, and you will get a litany of actions I took. But maybe records don't count anymore in politics. Maybe it's just these inflated promises that people go by.
Why do they support you then?
I'm sorry?
Why do they support you then? Chevron?
Free country. Why shouldn't Chevron? By the way, Chevron employs a lot of very talented people, hardworking folks, engineers, construction workers. Chevron, you know, that's a problem with politics. They're not the bad guy. And does everybody here drive an electric vehicle? You need Chevron. I need Chevron. My people of the state of California need Chevron. You know, it's unfortunate that we sort of use these tags and we paint with these broad brushes. Chevron wants to give me a check. That's their prerogative. What I believe is wrong in politics is that we try to paint people by one little thing. Hold me accountable based on my record. And that's the thing. People, some of these candidates are saying he took a check from Chevron, so he's got to be bad on the environment. I say, look at my record and compare it to their record. See what they've done on the environment. Rest my case.
The other side of gasoline prices being high is public transit, and yet a lot of transit agencies are facing a fiscal cliff. BART, Muni in San Francisco, for example. Why do you think that is, and what would you as governor do about it?
So, and I apologize because you all probably commiserate about this all the time. Why do we treat transportation as a commodity that if you can afford it, you can get it? When we know that you need to have a job, you need to get to work, and you got to get there on time. You need reliability. We should be treating our transportation system, including transit, as indispensable. That's why I'm going to complete high-speed rail, not this way, not the way it's been done, because that's outrageous that there has been so much overspending and that so many communities must have been left out of the loop when the decisions were made about how to plan the high-speed rail project, because otherwise, why would they be suing so often and winning? And so I believe what we have to do is sit down and let's decide as a family, what do we need to see? And then let's figure out how we fund it. And we do it just the opposite way. We look at what we have, and then we decide what we'll fund. And so does it surprise you that we do very little to help families that need childcare? Does it surprise you that we shortchange mental health versus physical health? Does it surprise you that those potholes in your community don't get filled as quickly as people want? I think that is the worst way to do politics. You figure you can survive the next election so long as they don't run over that pothole. That's a bad way to do government. I believe government leaders must go to the people and tell them what they need to hear. And that is, I need more money so I can have cleaner transit. I need more money to fill that pothole. I need more money because too many young kids at the age of 10 are considering suicide. And we need to help those families. And then let's decide what we will do. But let's not try to fool people about the needs that we have. And then let's also examine where we get the money. Do some programs have to go? Probably so. For 4 years, I had to balance my books in the Department of Health and Human Services. And by the way, my budget at the Department of Health and Human Services was bigger than the budget of the state of California. And I know some of you heard me say this, so forgive me for just being a broken record. My budget at the Department of Health and Human Services was not just bigger than the state of California's budget. It's bigger than the Department of Defense's budget. It's bigger than the Department of Defense's budget and the state of California's budget combined. And 4 years in a row, I balanced it. You will not know where I made cuts because I don't have revenue generating capacity as a Secretary of Health and Human Services. I had to live within my means the way you have to, and every year I had to figure out where I would cut. I made my cuts. I guarantee you no one can find where I made the cuts because I didn't cut to the bone and deny people services that they needed in the Department of Health and Human Services.
You said you will get high-speed rail done. Of course, it's impossible to do that without federal funding, which has been cut off. Right now,
and they owe us the money. Just because Donald Trump said he's cutting it out, that's not the way you do business.
it was allocated.
We earned that money. It's our money in the first place because we pay more in taxes to the federal treasury than does any other state, and we have a right to expect some of that to be returned to us.
Yeah. But right now, the governor is funding it with a cap and trade, now cap and invest. A big portion of that money generated from those auctions is going toward high-speed rail. Another big bucket of it is going to, I think, administrative costs for CAL FIRE. That means that less is available for environmentally friendly housing, right, at the local level. So would you stop using money for high-speed rail from cap and invest? I mean, how would you make that work and still give local communities more money?
Scott, I'll take you with me. When I'm governor and I get to take a look at the budget and see where all the money's going, what I will tell you is this: we're going to do high-speed rail. We're going to figure out why there are so many delays. We're going to sit everyone down again. I will try to resolve some of the litigation that's out there. And I'm going to say this is day one for high-speed rail under Governor Becerra, and we will have everyone come in, including those recalcitrant players who are thinking they got to sue us. And I'm going to say, no, let's sit down. This is, by the way, this is what I had to do when I was dealing with COVID. This is what I had to do when there was a cyber attack on the health sector, and it brought down the electronic data communication that was necessary for you to be able to have your doctor transmit your medical records to the hospital so you could have your surgery. Cyber attack to a company called Change Health, which is owned by United Health. Just look up Change Health cyber attack, and you Google it, and you will find what we had to do. The system almost collapsed because people weren't getting paid, because you couldn't send in your bill so you could get reimbursed. And insurance companies aren't going to pay you for when they don't have the bill. And so we had to resolve that quickly. I did. I brought in the CEOs from most of the insurance industry, and I brought in the leaders of the various health sector associations, and we resolved it by making sure what we did was we provided zero-interest loans to most hospitals, doctors, all providers. And I started. I took the lead because I couldn't get the insurers to agree to do that. I put a loan out there for in the billions. Medicare, Medicaid, we put money out there, and I said, I'm usually not allowed to do this, to give you taxpayer dollars without an invoice, but I've gotten permission from my general counsel and the Office of Management and Budget, and I'm going to put that out there, because I know you have to do the operation, and I know you're going to get reimbursed, except you can't bill Medicare yet. But I know it's going to happen, so rather than you not do it, let's reconcile our records. When I turned then to the insurance CEOs, and I said, we're doing this. It was your fault that the cyber attack hit. What are you going to do? Ultimately, they came on board, and essentially what it was a zero-interest loan to these providers. And we put money up front so they would go ahead and do business, and then they started billing once the system got back up. That's what you got to do. That's what I'll do with high-speed rail. That's what I'll do on a number of these subjects, including housing. I think it is insane for us to move without everybody saying, you gave us a chance, we had a seat at the table, we're on board. Eventually, someone's going to complain. And the way you complain in this society is you go to court.
Yeah, I see a flashing red light. We're out of time. But Secretary Becerra, thank you so much for coming by. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you again. Got to stop meeting like this. And I want to bring Carolyn Coleman, Executive Director of Cal Cities, back up.
Wow, oh wow, oh wow. Is that a great session or what? Please join me in once again thanking the candidates who showed up to be here with us today. We know they were all invited. We know there are lots of demands on their time. I certainly appreciate the three who made cities a priority today. Let's also give a round of applause to our moderator, Scott Schaefer from KQED. I am a big fan of his podcast, Political Breakdown, and if you want to stay informed about the race, I encourage you to tune in as well. Today's conversation is a part of an ongoing effort here at Cal Cities to make sure that whoever becomes the next governor is familiar with cities from day one of his or her administration. So we're going to continue as the race goes forward to find opportunities to engage with them and to make sure that cities are front and center on their minds. Finally, I want to thank all of you for being in the room today, for being in the building yesterday. I ran into hundreds of you in the building yesterday. And I also want to thank so many of you for being in the Capitol this morning. There are many, many cities who were recognized, and certainly Cities Week was recognized in the Assembly this morning. And you know, that's what being at the table looks like. It looks like what you've been doing this week. So thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be a voice for cities here in Sacramento. Now, I heard some talk about bagels this morning. I don't know which kind you like, plain ones or ones with this or ones with that. I know that we have some food for you. You are welcome to eat in this room. I believe the buffets are set up outside. And let's have a good rest of the conference. Thank you so much for your participation this morning.